An entire world is ready
for you to start your career teaching the path to wellness.
Mastering the science of mindfulness.
And the art of coaching.
To help clients achieve mental, emotional, and physical betterment of life.
Through movement,
nutrition,
recovery, and regeneration.
Because impacting one person impacts a family.
Impacting a family impacts a community.
And impacting a community impacts the world.
Become an NASM certified wellness coach.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Mr. Ken Miller. How are you?
Good, Wendy. How are you doing? Good seeing you.
I'm telling you, it is a rainy, cold day here in Atlanta, but besides that, I am fantastic.
Always good to hear.
Always good. Well, today's topic, we're going to talk about how not to have pain in your neck. So I know oftentimes Stacy might say, Ken, you are a pain in the neck, but we're not going to talk about that one on this show. Today, we're going to try to help those that have chronic pain or lingering aches and pain. We're not here to actually diagnose pain or anything like that. But you know what? You wake up sometimes, your neck is sore, and we're going to talk about how to help fix that.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where, when I do my training sessions, I'll do my intake of, okay, how you doing? What have you been doing? How are you feeling today? And, it's not uncommon for that during that intake process where I'm talking to them, they're saying, you know what? And they start rubbing their neck. They don't even talk about their neck, right? So they just start rubbing it. It's like, yeah, I had a long meeting today. It's behind the computer, or I was just trying to get this assignment done, whatever it may be. And it just gives all the reason in the world why they would be rubbing their neck, even though they don't say it. I like to look at their posture and their positioning, and if their head's forward, they're shrugging, then it's one of those things where, yeah, you know what? Let's pause, take a little time out. Let's get this moving better first, because unless the neck is moving well, unless the shoulders can move well, which tension up here can be a reflection of how well they're going to move through the upper body. Unless we get things moving, grease up the joints up there a little bit, then nothing else is going to move well, despite, the workout, whether it's upper body day, lower body day. Unless we get the neck moving well, get you without discomfort, tension, then the whole workout's going to suffer overall.
Yes. And I would just say even life will suffer, not just the workout. And unfortunately, I fall victim to this. So when we were talking about the neck, I'm like, ooh, pick me, because I actually, ended up having some issues with my neck. And of course, with my background, what I do for a living, I know that I should be this fine-tuned machine. However, it was not the case when it came to my neck. And I let it go on for so long that literally my right arm no longer worked. I went to pick up a weight and I couldn't move it. I tried to do a tricep extension. So I was laying down and trying to do like the little headbanger things, and I couldn't extend my elbow. And of course I thought, well, maybe I'm just weaker. So instead of just like trying it with no weight, I went down in weight and went down in weight and went down in weight until finally I put everything to the side and realized I can't extend my arm. And so I actually had to go see a medical professional. And you know what the number one question they asked me? When did I have my really bad car accident? And I'm like, never. At this point, unfortunately, I have been since then, but I had never been in a car accident.
Right.
Never. And so they're like, no, ma'am, there's got to be something. And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, were you in some kind of like a fight? I'm like, nope, not that I'm aware of. Were you? And I mean, they were going down the list, and it was like, no. And, comes to find out, I ended up doing a scan, and I had 3 bulging discs, one about to blow at any given time. And because of that impingement, that was causing, nerve issues. And so therefore I couldn't move my arm, which is a very scary situation for those of you guys that have ever been there. It is frightening.
Yeah. And I think, Wendy, what you're sharing with us right now is a reflection of a lot of people, minus the arm numbing part, granted. But
you don't want to fling it around. I mean, literally did not work, Ken.
Yeah. I mean, unless there's cause to get, your neck looked at to the depth that you did, it is one of those things where, again, whatever you were doing, and I've said this a million times on our podcast, right? You know, who you are today, your body as it is right now is a summation of everything that you've been through from birth until now. That means all the bad stuff that you mentioned, car accident, fight, whatever was going on with the neck at the time, but also every good thing that you've done, stretching, body work, um, um, you know, little trigger point, whatever you're doing. So that is, that's what a lot of our clients go through, but it's such a slow creep, right? So
Yeah.
especially the last couple of years, how many trainings have we done virtually where we're looking at the screen 8 hours? We have, we're teaching internationally. So here we are, we have to try to read the class and we are trying to talk to the translator, but here we are 8 hours looking at the screen, just looking straight ahead. But that position, that extension that we're putting our necks through, right? The forward position of our head, that, you don't do those things 8, 9, 10 hours a day without paying a price. And you do that day after day after day after day, then the muscles will start to say, hey, this is what I do. I'm going to do it because I do it really well. But unfortunately, like the bulging discs in your neck, they're going to say, well, hold on, wait a second. For you to do that all day long, I'm going to have to be in this position. But guess what? You're putting all that undue stress and that force just anteriorly, and I'm assuming anteriorly, but also laterally, depending on how your neck is cricked or cracked or crooked. And day after day, hour upon hour, it's going to take its toll. So a lot of times, we've talked about the low back. So the issues with the low back when it comes to the discs that have to experience what forces the vertebrae are putting on, the neck is no different. The neck is no different from that vantage point.
And those of you guys that are just joining, Ken Miller and I are talking about not having pain in the neck. And we're going to talk about things that have personally happened with me and things that I know Ken has experienced with his clients and probably within himself at some point, to try to help you guys avoid some of this, because, for me, it was very frightening. And, we talked about, like, when you're looking at your scan and you see this crazy, so when you think about the neck has 7 vertebrae, and which are your bones that make up your spine. And so in between each one of your bones, you have those little spongy discs. And over time, if you have a muscle that's overactive and tight, it kind of compresses on that disc. And that's what makes it bulge on the other side. And so the first thing that the doctor said once he looked at my scan, I said, wow, that's interesting. Whose is that? And they're like, that's your neck. And I'm like, what? Like, I was losing my curve, because you have a natural curve in your neck. My neck was pretty much straight. And then on top of that, you see like these vertebrae that were like all not straight. They were just like crooked. And, and so, he asked what I did for a living and all that. And it comes to find out that, the first thing that they wanted to go to was surgery with me. Like, you know what we can do is we can remove this disc, because if it blows, you're going to be in a heap of trouble, but we can take the pressure off of that nerve that's causing nerve damage to your arm. And it's a quick fix. That was exactly those words, a quick fix. And so my response, I don't want you to open up my neck. I don't want you to take anything out that I wasn't, anything that I was born with, I'd like to keep. And so I said, well, what about doing corrective exercise? And he said, well, you can try it, but I'll see you in 6 months. And that was 3 years ago.
Oh, there
and
you go.
So I know. And so I'm telling you guys, like, the stuff that we're going to talk about, ways to try to help get yourself out of pain before just going in and just getting it operated on. Hopefully some of these suggestions will help, because it truly helped me. And I have full range of motion and movement in my arms. I can do all kinds of crazy stuff with my head. So I can go out dancing. I can do all kinds of things.
Right.
And not, and I still have everything intact.
Now, and that's awesome, because for those of you that have never seen Wendy tear up the dance floor, she can tear up the dance floor. I mean, like, tear it up. You got splinters all over the place.
But you can do the worm. I can do all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. So I also want to put out there that, we're actually mentioning the position of the head and the neck and the shoulders. But I think, the other thing that often goes just laying under the covers, is the fact that you can focus on posture all you want, but if you're one of those people that carries a lot of tension in the neck to where you're just, you're having a bad day, you're in a high stress environment, that tension can come about, emotionally and mentally. So we are, kind of diving into just opening up the possibility that it's not just about work and positions that you hold. If you're in a chronic position to where your head's forward, your shoulders are forward, your cervical spine's extended, there's also just an internal, there can be an internal drive for stress to be held up in the neck region. So just because you don't sit behind a computer or have to look at a computer screen all day long doesn't mean that, well, say I don't have a technologically biased occupation, but if you're one of those that just carries stress in the neck, just know that, this conversation can include you as well.
Well, and this is what I found interesting because, me being the research nerd that I am, I wanted to look up, it wasn't due to a fall. It wasn't, like, unfortunately with aging, you can get, osteoarthritis, and you can get arthritis, you can get all kinds of things. And with the weight of our head, sometimes that's when we start, driving our neck forward. But on top of the tension and everything in the shoulders, that can actually, because our traps and the origin and insertion of the muscles from the neck to the shoulders, they play an important role that puts us in these positions, like you said, for an extended period of time. But it was also heavy backpacks. And as much as I travel with my laptop, and I put stuff in a backpack. I hop on a plane. I have my purse. And, anytime you have something on your shoulders, or even if you tap your shoulders, you start to activate a muscle, even though it's unintentional. And so over time, that overactivity of me, having a backpack, putting my shoulders up, hunching my shoulders, especially on one side that I wore my purse, because you do have to elevate your shoulder in order to keep that purse from falling off. And it's something that sometimes as females, we don't think about. And so I ended up going to a very light backpack purse, which, yes, I'm an old lady with a backpack purse, just saying. But you know what? It was better for me because, it evened me out. And then I started to say, you know what? I don't need all this stuff. I have you bring all of my recovery tools, so I don't put those in my backpack anymore. I don't do any of that stuff.
That's true.
And it was one way that I was just looking at my life in general. How can I decompress? How can I reduce my anxiety? Start to do some flexibility work. I added traction. I bought a traction unit, so I do traction 10 minutes every single day, as well as corrective exercises. So for 20 minutes of every day, I do that, and I have been able to avoid surgery. So just.
Yeah. And I think, you're a great story, Wendy, because, when they said, I'll see you in what they give you 3 months?
6 months. Well, they said, definitely 6 months I would have surgery, but he said he would see me back probably within, 1 to 3 months.
Yeah. And then 3 years later, right. Which, that's a great testimonial to the fact that there is such a thing as self-care. You are empowered once you find a recipe that works for you, that like you found it, Wendy, as far as, okay, you figured out, okay, well, how much load can my spine take? Right. So you figured out your threshold, right? Apparently it's not a full bag of whatever you carry around, but and then I'm the pack horse because now I bring my Volt. I bring all the hey, do you have your Volt? Yeah, here, you just use it, right?
See, I'm smart.
You're smart. You work smarter, not harder. You can bring all the stuff. But there is a way of self-managing, and I think as the listeners, or you guys that are listening to us here today, here on Random Fit podcast of Don't Have a Pain in the Neck, what we're really discussing here is that, for one, there is resolution to neck pain and discomfort, right? We're not really here talking about pain, so to speak, but things that induce stress on the neck and the shoulder, because people don't realize there's about 20 muscles that cross the neck, right? You mentioned the 7 cervical spine and all the discs in between, but you have about 20 muscles that, hey, muscles in the neck are no different than the muscles in the rest of the body, in the fact that they just, they contract and relax, they shorten and then lengthen. You have a high concentration of proprioceptors that are really sensitive to position, speed, and motion, because there's a lot of information that has to transfer, from the neck, as far as how to position the head on the shoulders, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people don't know that there is a reflex where, what they call a pelvo-ocular reflex, or is it ocular-pelvo? I think I've read it both ways.
It's pelvo-ocular, I think.
Pelvo-ocular, right? So is Tony right next to you?
No, my dog was saying hello, so I just
okay. So with the so how the hips are positioned and moved, it's related. It relates closely to how the neck is going to be positioned and move, because as we ambulate, as we go from A to B, the position of the lumbopelvic hip complex is going to have to know what's going up above it with the neck region, because the hips know that, okay, here's our cockpit up here, and our pilot up above has to see where we're going. So the hip has to tell the neck where its position is, so that the neck can adjust to make sure that the head is level and able to look at the horizon, right? So,
and I think that's important when we're working out too. Again, why we talk so much about always think that, your eyes and chest should follow each other when you're working out. And so, one of those things, like when we're talking about don't have a pain in the neck here on Random Fit with Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, we really are just stressing about the importance of having really good posture, because once your neck, you start to have these pains, it really does affect what's happening in your upper body. So, it can lead to headaches. And who wants to have a headache? Right. Myself, definitely not. Obviously, when you're looking on a postural standpoint and your neck is way out in front of you, it just doesn't even look good. So, if you want to look better, bring your chin back. But then nobody wants to double chin, because that's not good. So if you just, who wants double chins? But, really going through, and I think if we look at, our corrective exercises as a whole, I think it's really important that we talk about, and I mean, I'll let you take the lead on this, but I think it's important to talk about just, muscles that we should be foam rolling and muscles that we should be stretching in order to kind of help, if you have these issues, help long term. Now, one thing I will say that's not in any of the textbooks that we have with NASM, but I learned as a manual therapist, we've got this big, huge muscle that's in the front of your neck. So it's called your sternocleidomastoid. And so there's a spelling test for that later. But we call it the SCM for short. And that muscle attaches to your sternum, and then your clavicle, which is your collarbone, and then behind the ear. And when that one muscle alone gets tight, it can actually cause a behind the eye headache. And so just by relaxing that one muscle on the same side as the behind the eye headache, you can actually get rid of that with, just that one muscle. So I'm telling you, I want to see thank you notes sent to me later.
Yeah.
Because that's a big one. That's a big one.
I'm going to write that down. Thank you for the sternocleidomastoid. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you got 20 muscles that cross the neck, but it takes, an assessment process, and that can be as easy as, sitting up tall, kind of flexing the chin down and seeing what stretch you might feel on the back of the neck. You can even do a little head tilt, left ear to left shoulder, right ear to right shoulder. You can even turn right and left, and you can get a feel for where your sticky points are, right? So it's like left ear to left shoulder, I feel a little bit more tension on the right side of the neck versus when I tilt the head the other way. So taking some inventory, it's not a bad idea, to where with a lot of people, if you have a arm or hand dominance based on your activity, so maybe if you're a carpenter where you do a lot of hammering using your right side, there may be some dominance there, and that might give some explanation as to why you have uneven stress from the right to left shoulder. But also, like you mentioned, Wendy, what I've seen, especially in school age kids, is, hey, this is the shoulder that I put my backpack strap on, or the left side of the shoulder. So from that vantage point, you can kind of start putting the pieces of the puzzle together to kind of come up with your own self-care program, like with what you did, Wendy. Kind of evaluated how you were living your life, where and how you were loading your body. You address that. Well, that's the first part of intervention, is stop digging the hole. So if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging is what we say, right? So first thing is stop making it worse. And then that's the first part of making sure that you're doing what you can to self-care. Oh, we lost you, Wendy.
Sorry, I
Is it-
was muted. I think it's
Okay.
also important to evaluate too, how do you sleep? Because I was a side sleeper and I also sleep
Mhm.
with my arm under my pillow. So again, I'm really shortening muscles for an extended period of time. So I actually bought a different pillow to try to help try to regain curvature back into my neck.
Mhm.
I bought, like I said, a pulley machine that kind of helps with traction. I bought an actual traction machine that again I talked to the doctor about of which would be best for me. Again, I don't tell you to go buy a traction unit and then pump it up to some crazy number, because I have very specific numbers and a protocol that I had to follow based on utilizing some actual unit that that I was told to get. But on the on the corrective side too, if like that you sleep on your side and you sleep with your shoulder up, it's really trying to change your ways. And just like when you go on a diet or you try to incorporate exercises that you've never been a fan of, it's a hard thing to do. And so give yourself time. And that's what I did. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try this. I'm going to show
Yeah.
this guy if I do this every single day. But I had to commit. So you've got to commit. If you are having these issues and they're continuously happening and they're reoccurring more often than they should, talk to someone to see if there's some type of traction. And all that is like with mine, I lay down, I put a strap on my forehead, and then I pump this machine up to a certain number. And then once I feel a good stretch and it's to that degree of where the doctor told me to stay, I hold that for 10 minutes. Then I let myself out, and then I immediately go into activation exercises on the muscles that are underactive, that actually allowed those overactive muscles to stand in place, or to put me in these bad compromised positions. And so, some exercises that I did. So before I even go into it, I'm going to say, if you've got pain in the neck and you're listening to Random Fit with Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, I want you to pay attention. So if you know that you've got some neck pain, you're limited in rotation and side to side movement, you start to have these tingling feelings in your fingers and your shoulders, I grab a foam roller. I foam roll my thoracic spine, which is like the middle back. I don't go below my shoulder blades, and I don't go up actually on the cervical spine at all, just middle back. I open up my chest. So I do some pec stretches. I do some little, wall angels, if you will. So which is I lay my entire back flat against the wall. I move my arms over my head and then back down. I do retraction, which is I double chin, and I do that for reps, like putting my head against something and then trying to bring it back. And then I do face down exercises. So I'm on my stomach, almost kissing my floor. So my spine's in the right position. And then I do stuff like cobras, which is just going back, squeezing my shoulder blades and dropping my shoulders down. I do rows with a band. I mean, literally just things that I can do on my floor for 20 minutes. And I do, different things, but those are the type of exercises that have been very, very beneficial for me. And, I don't know if there's some that you suggest for your clients, but those are pretty much my go-tos and the order that I go into it.
Right. I think, with the and those are all great exercises, Wendy. But I think where we kind of miss the boat from a total body relief standpoint, because, when you have pain or discomfort or stress, it's like, I mean, seriously, right now, the right side of my shoulder is a little, I got some tension here. But you go through everything that you talked about. Wendy, do you have a Theracane at home?
I do, and I love it.
Yeah. So
yes.
If and that's one thing that we haven't mentioned, which is I have one that actually, if you don't know what a Theracane is, it's basically a hook with a couple knobs that stick out. But what you do with that hook is you take the hook end and you actually place it in the case of the upper traps. I might put it somewhere between my neck and my shoulder, more of the backside. So if we're talking about the levator scapula right up here, I can just, with my hands, I'm just holding on to a couple of the handles and I'm just applying pressure. So as you mentioned, self-myofascial technique, Wendy, as we would teach it, is you find a tender spot and you want to just stay on there, sit on it until you've got about a 50 to 60% decrease in tension. And no different when it comes to me using a Theracane. And again, there's a lot of products out there that have that hook design, but Theracane's basically one of the first to the market and basically my go-to. I'll put it there and I'll just hold it. And then As I might do some mobility work with some myofascial technique, I might just do a little bit of a little side tilt, a little side flex, and get the tissue moving with a little pressure, just to kind of, move the connective tissue a little bit. And then I'll do an assisted stretch with, doing that same side flex position. And that often is enough to kind of down regulate the tension in the neck. And as I was starting to say before, is that you do the strengthening exercise like that, like what you're doing, those prone chin tucks, Wendy. So that's working the deeper muscles in the neck. But now it comes time to integrate things, and where people usually stop, it's like they do a stretch, they might do the chin tucks, like, oh, okay, I feel so much better. But here's the thing, you've only you put a Band-Aid on an open wound, right? It's like you might kind of stop the tension, you might relieve some tension. However, the underlying issue is still there, which for a lot of people, it's just a lack of integration between this tender spot and the rest of the body. Well, if there's a compensation, or if there's muscles or joints that aren't moving the way they're supposed to move, well, guess what? That tension's only going to come back again. We've said it in other podcasts where, you got to get that area that you just addressed to play nice with the rest of the body. And unless there's that connectivity, that connection, that ability to integrate an area that you just, let's say, repaired, or you've taken care of the muscle imbalance that's in existing in a certain area, in this case it's the neck, unless there's that communication for the rest of the body, say, oh, okay, so the neck, you're able to do this now, okay, so let's kind of play together, and we won't do things that cause you stress as long as you don't do things that cause us stress. So that integrated part that comes into it. So when we talk about integration, we're talking about cobras, to where now we have to use those muscles close to the neck. So the muscles between the shoulder blades, with the rhomboids, the lower trap. So the muscles middle, lower part of the shoulder blade that gets those shoulder blades to have a better relationship with the rib cage. But also the muscles under the rib cage, when we talk about, let's say, a push-up plus, where you're just finishing the top end of the push-up, and we're getting those muscles to play better together, is what we're really trying to go for when it comes to kind of completing the picture when we're addressing the neck. So again, part of getting the neck to be better is to but to let the body do more work. When
You complete me.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
You
complete me. Those of you guys that are just joining us, Ken Miller and I on Random Fit are talking about don't have a pain in the neck. Don't be a pain in the neck either. But when we're talking about pain, the big thing is I think, it's important to identify what are some of the factors of your life or your job or just in general that could be causing stress to your neck. Is it, your shoulders are elevated? Is it stress? Is it your job? Meaning, we hear so much about tech neck, looking down at your phone, looking forward at your computer. All of that plays a huge role in compensations that are going to lead to muscles that are stressed that will eventually become sore. And then you have that pain in the neck. So I think identifying it first is going to be really important. And once you say, okay, you know what, my neck is forward, what should I do? Well, do what you can to bring it back. And, one of the little keys that I have with my clients that do have forward heads is I have them when they're driving, keep their head on their back, like the headrest. And I also make sure that they look at their headrest, because so many new cars nowadays have the headrests that are pointed forward, and it just kills me. So because that's actually pushing you forwards. If anything, what I ended up doing with my husband's car, whose was really bad, is we took it and I turned it backwards. And so literally it was straight. So I was still protected should we have gotten into a wreck. However, it wasn't pushing me forward when I was sitting in the passenger or the driver's seat. And so there are little tricks to look at. But as Ken said, identify the problem first. Try to go into some stretches. If you notice it's forward, stretch the front and the side of your necks. Then at that point, go into some activation work, bringing your shoulders back, bringing your neck back. And then on an integration side, for what I would do, I always do things like a squat to row. I try to integrate my upper body and my lower body, not just the area that I'm trying to get muscles to activate and hold that position. Because then remember, the body's one unit. So if something is messed up at the ankle, it can blow out your shoulder. And that really holds true. And so you want to try to be in the best position at all times for everything that you do. But having specifically good care of your neck and your shoulders, it can minimize headaches. It can help you think straight. You're going to get more clarity. You're just going to feel better. You'll sleep better. You'll move better. You'll just be better.
You'll just be better.
You'll just be better.
Yeah. And I think, just to kind of write on those thoughts, it's, first things first, if your pain or discomfort is something that's just, it's affecting your life in a negative way, I think go to your primary care, primary caregiver, and because within the scope of practice for a personal trainer, dealing with pain is not really it's not in their wheelhouse, right? So when in doubt, refer out, go see somebody, get it checked out, just like you did, Wendy. So from that vantage point, we just want to make sure that we clear the deck and make sure that, okay, if it's something that does require medical intervention, right? Especially if there's numbing, tingling, things like that, just know for sure that it's,
or it doesn't work,
yeah, exactly.
It just stops working.
Yeah, because what we're talking about today is more like a self-care format. So again, you're cleared for movement, regular movement, your exercise, things like that, things you can do on your own, that isn't like, hey, we need you now, right? Mm-hmm. So from that standpoint, we just got to make sure that we take care of business, and then just know that you're in a position to take care of yourself. It just requires consistency, and it does require a total body approach. So Wendy, this you weren't such a pain in the neck today. So I'll say
thanks.
Yeah, a lot of good information as always.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. Thank you everybody for listening to this podcast of Random Fit and our topic of don't be a pain in the neck. So if you like what you listened to today, like, follow, subscribe, comment, let us know if there's anything that you'd like for us to talk about, and we'll be sure to get right on that, because Wendy is a research nerd, and she likes to dive into it. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.